upstream energy research until 2004, when he assumed his current role in consulting. During his time with Wood Mackenzie, Tony has been involved in a wide variety of energy consulting, benchmarking, peer group reviews, and expert witness. He has worked for a range of clients, including oil and gas majors, national oil companies, governments, independent E&P players, and utility companies. Tony has over 30 years of energy industry experience, having worked with Chevron, Trafalgar House Oil and Gas, later spun off as Hardy Oil and Gas, Gaffney Klein and Associates, and Louisiana Land and Exploration, in a variety of roles encompassing exploration and production operations, new ventures, contract negotiation, strategic planning, and international consultant. Tony holds a BSc Mechanical Engineering degree from Liverpool University, MSc Petroleum Engineering degree from Imperial College, London, and an MBA Business Studies degree from Granfield School of Management. Please welcome with me Tony and
Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to thank the organisers, the MEPEX, the sponsors for inviting me on this auspicious day of the launch of the MEPEX online website. I'm sure you're going to have hours of fun looking at all the deals you can do on this website when the oil price maybe improves. There's not a lot of money being spent at the moment, which I'll talk to you about during my presentation. Okay, so the title of my talk is Impact of Low Oil Prices on the Middle East. But before we really get into that, I just want to set the scene and the context of where we are in the industry. And essentially, I just want to say a few words on what's happened to the industry since OPEC decided it wanted to maintain market share at the momentous decision back in November 2014, when they decided not to cut production in response to the falling oil price. So I thought I'd start off with a quote. I thought you might not read this, so I might not be able to read this, so I was going to read it out to you, which I will do anyway. So as a result of the fall in demand and the rise in non-OPEC supplies, we recognized too late that oil was overpriced, that it had reached an unwarrantably high level, destroying the state of virtual equilibrium between supply and demand. The recent sharp drop in prices has not been good for either producers or consumers. Neither can plan with confidence for long-term energy production, investment, and consumption. What the oil industry badly needs is price stability in the long term. Anyone care to guess who said that? No? Oh, you know. That's cheating, Habib. Okay, it was Sheikh Yamani in 1986. Sheikh Yamani was the Minister of Petroleum for Saudi Arabia between 1962 and 1986. And he's a very acknowledged wise man and oil industry expert who still is involved in the sector even to this day. So that was back in 1986, and it does sound very familiar. I mean, it almost feels to me, in the introduction you heard I had 30 years experience. I think I lied a bit. I think I'm probably more like 35 or 40 years experience now. So I've been in the industry a long time. I've lived through at least 5 booms and busts so far and managed to keep working. This one might be my last one. I don't know. We shall see. Anyway, it does feel like deja vu to me. It feels very like 1986. And I don't know if you all know the old joke that was around back then, which was, how do you find a geologist in Houston? The answer, call a cab. They were all working, driving taxis. Now, I don't think it's got that bad yet, but I haven't been to Houston for a while, so I haven't got personal experience of that. So will history repeat itself? This is just to remind you what happened back then. So back in 1985, 86, essentially OPEC were fed up with losing market share to The new North Sea offshore industry was really developing then, coming on stream, and they decided they really didn't want to lose any more market share, so they opened the taps, and that created supply glut. It also took the oil price from $34 a barrel down to $10 a barrel. Now that's exactly the same percentage price cut we've just had in between 2014 and now. So the point to note here, though, is that from 1986 onwards, it was almost 15 years with the oil price trading in a sort of 20 to, well, probably less, 15 to 25 dollar per barrel range before it really started taking off again and before it got back to that $34 a barrel again. And that only happened in around 2000, 2001, when we saw the start of Chinese growth taking off and what has then become known as the global super cycle in commodities. And then you follow the curve on up. So I forgot there was a little blip back there in 1990 when Saddam visited Kuwait. So that caused quite a bit of an effect on the oil price, but it was very short-lived. It was very temporary. So coming back to the sort of growth story, we saw rising prices essentially from 2000 all the way up to 2007. And it was reaching prices you would never have believed. I was just reminded, talking to Habib before we started this presentation, that back in 1986, oil companies were doing deals, PSCs, which had price caps of around $40 or $45 a barrel. No one believed it would ever go above $50 a barrel. How wrong we all were. Unbelievable. Anyway, so we continue that growth story. In July 2008, we hit $147 per barrel. Goldman Sachs was saying it's going to go to $200 a barrel. Fortunately, they were wrong. And we had the global economic crisis. And that caused that large drop. We went back down to around about $40 a barrel in 2008, 2009. But fortunately, it was short-lived. It rebounded very quickly and regained those levels above $100 a barrel again. And then we've had sort of some price volatility, but still up above $100 a barrel until the recent decision by OPEC to look for market share. And now you all know the story. We hit $27 a barrel in January, and hopefully we're now on an upward climb again, but we'll see. It's too early to call, really. So that's the history. So coming to what that means, it really is, been tremendously difficult for the industry. The oil company results are grim. They've delivered the worst results for over a decade, and in BP's case, the worst results ever in their history. I get the feeling that this region is somewhat cushioned by the effects of this somewhat. And certainly I just want to really make the point, there really is, the industry is on its knees outside this industry. Aberdeen is absolutely, there's people being laid off left, right, and center. Every other house in the street has got someone who they know has been laid off. It is really hurting. The industry is really hurting at the moment. And this has caused a lower for longer mindset to now be inculcated into the industry. Everyone believes it. Everyone thinks it's going to be lower for longer. But what we don't know is how long. But it's also difficult for the producing countries. They are also feeling the pain. It's impacting the likes of Saudi and Kuwait, who are turning to the bond market to shore up the budget shortfalls, whilst the likes of Venezuela, Nigeria, Libya, and Algeria, whose budgets are most severely impacted by the low oil price, are really pressing for OPEC to cut production. They really need higher prices. And the industry has reacted in its usual way. It's been cutting costs. It's reacted swiftly and has laid off over 250,000 workers globally. Now, those laid off energy workers are facing difficult choices about their future in the industry, which is punctuated by booms and busts. And I really fear that this is leading to potentially another lost generation like we had in the 90s, which when these people leave the industry, they're never going to come back. And what you end up having is severe skill shortages and experience when the inevitable boom does come back. More significantly, the industry is cutting capex. And this chart on the left essentially shows the global exploration budgets. And overall, you can see that exploration spend, which had been on a rising trend for over 10 years, has been slashed from circa $100 billion per year to less than $70 billion in 2015, with a further $40 billion reduction in 2016, and with potential further cuts if the oil price does stay low for the rest of this year. The right-hand chart shows the drastic budget cuts in exploration spend made by some selected IOCs and NOCs since 2014. Chevron has cut by 70%, Marathon by 90%, PTTEP by 85%. Exploration really is in the dumps. No one really wants to do exploration anymore. And possibly the industry is learning to live without conventional exploration. Fresh exploration success has ceased to be the primary upstream growth engine. The chart on the left shows the period 2002 to 2005, where some 58 billion BOEs of reserves were sanctioned, of which 31 billion had been discovered in the preceding decade. But you contrast that to the chart on the right. In the period 2012 to 2015, only 19 billion barrels of oil equivalent reserves were sanctioned, a reduction of 70% compared to a decade earlier. So we really are struggling to find and develop reserves. Billion barrels of oil equivalent, so it's oil and gas. It's the global exploration discoveries. But this also indicates that there's a slowdown in development and development capex. And that leads me on to the next slide. This slide essentially collects and portrays geographically all the project deferrals that have occurred since the oil price crash. And you can see it's essentially showing the bubble charts of the billion BOEs of reserves which have been deferred. So all these projects are not happening because of the oil price crash. And that adds up to some 27 billion BOEs from around 68 projects. So that's a huge volume to take away from development. And of course, it is going to have severe impact in production going forward when we're likely to need it again. But the thing for this audience to note is the lack of deferrals or delays or cancellations in the Middle East. The Middle East truly is continuing, not quite as normal, but it is really helping out the service sector. The service sector is absolutely being decimated in the rest of the world. But look at any of the service companies' results, and you'll see that essentially the Middle East is helping offset the losses they're seeing elsewhere. So the Middle East, in terms of continued project development, continued production, is really helping the industry at the moment. But not helping enough, I don't think. This slide essentially shows what the consequences are of all those project deferrals. So what you're looking at on the left is essentially the loss of production of those projects going forward. And this shows that by sort of 2023, 2025, we will have lost potentially 3 million barrels of oil a day. So that's gone. We're not going to get that. So if you factor that in with the continued year-on-year decline of the fields which are already on stream, you can see, we sow the seeds of the next boom by our consequences of our actions now. The right-hand chart just shows the geographical split of that deferred total capex. And again, the real point for this audience is the Middle East doesn't appear in there. So the Middle East isn't really being impacted. And this next chart shows the reason why. So what this chart is showing is the break-even oil price of various resource themes. And the yellow diamonds are essentially the weighted average of that resource theme. So you can see on the lower left, you're starting with onshore OPEC, which has a weighted average break-even price of just under $20 per barrel. And then you go through all the way towards the right, you go through unconventionals, you go through onshore non-OPEC, you go through more unconventionals, the Canadian oil sands, the deep water, the